open door policy, but we'll get a little more into that. So without further delay, Chris, appreciate it, and our friends from Foresight, thank you.
Sure. So as Dave mentioned, my name's Chris Irwin. I'm with Foresight IT Solutions. We're a preferred Microsoft partner, and we're one of the 5 national partners that are trained and authorized to help deploy the Phish Hunter solution. So first I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is Phish Hunter and kind of how it came about. So Phish Hunter is a solution that takes advantage, as Dave mentioned, of multiple products that you may own or available through the Microsoft suite. And really its genesis came from what we're calling targeted phishing attacks. Some of you guys may have run into this in the past. You may be fighting it right now. There's a ton of solutions out there, particularly in the Microsoft suite when you start looking at advanced threat protection, etc., that capture, block, and prevent malware. ATP does a great job of that. I think 97% of the malware attacks now are getting caught before they ever hit end users. So it's a great testament to the suite. The hackers and the bad guys that are out there perpetrating these crimes are not stupid. You know, they see this, they know the traditional malware attacks and ransomware is becoming harder and harder. The detection software is getting better, and they're constantly changing. So what we've seen is a dramatic shift from these big bang attacks where they compromise somebody and they encrypt, you know, and hold for ransom their data, to something a lot more subtle that makes it way more difficult to detect. And essentially it's a trusted phishing attack. So they'll start going after individuals in your payroll department or those type of things in particular, but it could be anybody in the organization. And they send them an innocuous email, like most phishing attacks, and say, hey, we need you to reset your password, or hey, please log into Office 365 and do something. You know, that link is
Hey, Chris, you're not showing anything. I'm not sure if...
Is it not presenting yet? Well, I haven't started into the slides yet, but we do need to make sure it's presenting, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Thank you. Now, before I start flipping through the deck and nothing shows up, let me know if you can see that, Dave. So essentially, you know, they redirect them to a carbon copy of the Office 365 sign-in page. It's not really doing anything super malicious, which is one of the reasons or one of the ways they're trying to bypass the current security measures. And essentially, they're just scraping the creds on the back end, right? So I'm an end user. I click on the link. I log in. I get redirected to the Office 365 login page. I'm none the wiser. Can you see now, Dave? David?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. So essentially at that point, they've compromised my account and they've got my credentials. In a more traditional method, they'd run some malware or something along those lines, go encrypt a bunch of files, and the game's on, right? We're trying to recover from them and keep from paying them the ransom. But with a more nuanced attack, they don't necessarily run that type of malware. Now they start patterning my users. They start impersonating my users and attacking and infecting other users from a trusted account, from someone inside the organization that they know and trust. Things they'll do will be go set up a mail forwarder on the account. And so they log in, they come in from an unknown IP address or a non-typical IP address for that user. They set up a mail forwarder or change the mail forwarder so that now they can read that end user's email, all the correspondence coming in and out. They'll be able to see what's going on. And then they're going to go through and start trying to impersonate that user. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's over a period of weeks, where they'll start sending out emails, asking or soliciting additional information from their colleagues or customers, going through and purging those emails immediately. So they'll send it out, and then they purge it so that the actual user can't see that message. And they've been very successful with these. We have multiple customers we're deploying the solution for right now that have lost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Things like payroll information. Folks falling prey to this, and they get an email from their HR department that says, hey, can you send us your account information? We need to update your payroll. Gosh, that's coming from an internal address. It looks legit. It is legit, right? There's nothing wrong with the email, but it's from a compromised account, and the bad guys are looking at it, capturing that account routing information, and then stealing money out of their accounts, stealing direct deposit information. We've even had instances where CFOs have been targeted and compromised, and they're getting invoices approved and paid for without the CFO's notification on it, and I mean hundreds of thousands of dollars being pilfered. So what we've done is put together a solution we call Phish Hunter that takes advantage of a suite of Microsoft technologies to try and capture and remediate these type of attacks before they ever get a foothold in your organization and they're able to take advantage of your user base. So first thing we're going to take a look at is kind of the anatomy of Phish Hunter. So Phish Hunter comprises 6 different components. First, in the top left here, we see ASM. So that's Azure Security Management. It's recently been rebranded Cloud App Security, or Cloud App Security for Office 365. If you're familiar with that, Cloud App Security is the larger suite. Cloud App Security for Office 365 is exclusive to Office 365. So this solution, while it's tailored for O365 today, has the potential to be expanded out to include your Gmail or multiple other systems as well. What the ASM component allows us to do is the investigations, build policies and alerts around the particular activities that are happening in your environment. We go through and do a forensic analysis of what's going on today in your environment, particularly if you've been hit by an attack like this. We want to be able to go through, pattern out what that individual did, and make sure we incorporate that into your protection so that it doesn't happen again. Then we take advantage of Flow as the automated remediation criteria. So for those of you who are not familiar with Flow, it's an online workflow engine, and we'll take a look at that today, and I'll kind of show you how that works. After we've made the determination that something needs to happen, we take advantage of a couple of different Azure components for filtering and the actual remediation components. This happens with Azure Automation as well as Azure Functions. Then we're going to take advantage of Azure Active Directory Premium. Depending on what level of threat we find, whether that's a medium risk event or a high risk event, we're going to take different action. For medium risk events, typically we want to put them in a conditional access group and apply multi-factor authentication. It's not something that we're 100% confident, but it's something that's suspicious. We don't want to lock their account out, but we do want to give them, we do want to enforce that second factor of authentication to make sure they are who they say they are and it hasn't been compromised. So we take advantage of Azure Active Directory Premium for that. Finally, the last 2 components are going to be Power BI. Power BI allows you to quickly identify the attack vector. If you had a compromised account, we're collecting all this information. We give you a great way to go in, filter down, and identify where it came from, and then block it via ATP. So URL monitoring and blocking via Azure threat protection. So we're going to take a look here. And we say better together. Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking multiple phenomenal solutions that Microsoft has out there, and we're tying those together into the Phish Hunter solution. We're also giving you the ability to add that local insight. So there's a ton of different attack vectors out there, and they're constantly evolving. By you having the ability to control the policies, and we're providing feedback and input when you set those up, you can catch very specific actions that are happening in your particular organization or other organizations in the system. If one school has an attack, that particular policy and attack vector can be shared and incorporated into everyone else's solution so that nobody else gets hit by that. So let's kind of walk through what a trusted phishing attack looks like. Initial email gets sent from my bad guy here. My user clicks on it and their credentials are compromised. Now my bad guy is going to impersonate that user and start trying to collect information. So he's got his unauthorized access happens now. ASM or Cloud App Security is going to detect that, and we're going to find that via signature match. Once we've determined that it's a signature match, we're going to let Flow process it, and we're going to take advantage of Azure to lock the account out and prevent any additional damage from happening. At this point, the end user should be back in control of the account, and now we dump data down into Power BI from ASM. That gives us the ability, our local IT team, the ability to go back and do some forensic analysis on the attack. What did the vector look like? What URL initially compromised that end user? We can incorporate that into our training. We can go ahead and block it via the URL blocking and ATP and prevent it from infecting anyone else in the organization. Now, whenever bad guy tries to send an unauthorized email at this point, they'll be locked out, and we've prevented the next attack from happening. So the point of this solution is to try and identify these attacks as quickly as possible, automatically remediate them, and prevent them from spreading further. One of the things we're taking advantage of is a built-in anomalous detection engine. So this engine allows us to take an in-depth look at the user activities. What are they actually doing in the email system? Not to the email level, right? It's not spying on their email, but we want to know, what system functions they're doing. Are they purging emails after they send them out? Are they changing forwarding rules? Are they running scripts against, PowerShell scripts against the mailbox? Those type of things. It allows us to couple that with the inherent Microsoft Threat Intelligence feed, as well as the geolocation. So Microsoft has a giant machine learning engine on the back of every authentication that comes in through Azure Active Directory. So there's billions and billions of these today. We pattern out where the user typically logs in from, what their typical usage patterns are, and we're able to incorporate that into our anomalous detection engine. This is 100% session-based, so as users log in from multiple systems, they're hitting up, Exchange Online, they come in and they're using OneDrive or SharePoint, something along those lines. Every session is analyzed and scored, and we come up with a risk score based on a combination of the threat intelligence that we just spoke about. Once a particular threshold is hit, we're going to fire off an alert, and then we're going to allow for user feedback. Once that alert is triggered, that's where Phish Hunter comes in and starts providing that local analysis through a threat matrix that we're going to take a look at in a second, as well as the additional down-level activities that we can apply to this. So in this particular example, if we look at the anomalous detection engine, and we look at session 1, this is an admin user. So we want to give more scrutiny to users with administrative functions. It's coming in from a questionable ISP. Maybe they're typically coming in from an ISP in upstate New York. All of a sudden they start logging in from a ISP in sub-Saharan Africa. That's a little suspect. We want to raise that up, and that's going to get a much higher session risk. We look at number 4 on the list. Their location is not atypical, but the user agent they're coming in from, maybe they're coming in from a known bad device type or something along those lines. We'll score that a little higher. All that gets combined, and then the alert is generated. Once that alert is generated, then we go into our custom threat matrix. So this is a matrix that we maintain on the back end. It'll either live in a SQL server or in a file on your service account. And we keep track of the various activities based on the policies that we've created. Do we have a risky login event? Do we have a risky action event, or some type of risky email? We're going to keep track of these, and we're going to make them time-based, because a lot of the activities that we see in these attack vectors are in and of themselves innocuous on their own. Again, traveling, right? If I go on vacation and I log in from California next week, that may be completely fine. If I go in and change my mail forwarder, I'm going to go on leave for a month, and I change the mail forwarder on my box. Again, completely fine in and of itself. Even sending and purging emails is not abnormal. But when you start seeing them in context of, I logged in from New York, and then an hour later I logged in from India, and I changed my mail forwarder, something suspicious there. We know that is the pattern of an attack. We know that's not normal behavior aside from the impossible travel. All of a sudden we've got mail functions happening at the same time, and there's a very high likelihood that account's been compromised and needs to be under some additional scrutiny. And so we orchestrate that through our custom threat matrix. All right, so for those of you that haven't seen Cloud App Security and in the new Cloud App Security for Office 365, this is what the dashboard looks like. So first thing we do anytime we engage on this is we're going to turn on Cloud App Security. Even if you do this in a proof of concept, we're going to enable this for your environment. This information is collected regardless. This goes on in the background. You expose it by applying the correct licenses through Microsoft. But what this allows us to do is come back and do a forensic analysis of your environment for the last 30, 60 days and be able to pattern out those attack vectors. So as you can see, I've got several policies being hit here. What I can do, and we'll look at a couple of these in my environment where I know I've triggered events. You can see I've got a bunch of them in here. If you have been compromised and you're looking to deploy this, we can look for those specific accounts. We can pattern out the attack vector that they used. We'll be able to go in and pull out information that we can use in these policies. Some of this information you may have already collected, and if you have that, that's great. We can incorporate that as well. But we'll be able to pull out things like, what ISP they came from, what locations, if there were any specific tags, IP addresses, device types. So this is, typically we'll see common stuff in here, right? Windows, Chrome, etc. But we've uncovered several where they're getting attacked from a custom device type. It was a custom written bot sitting on a VMware machine. That's a red flag, right? If we see that, we know that's an issue, and that's very easy to incorporate in our policies and look for. This will tell us what policy and the account it actually hit. So there's some very useful information in here, and if we're trying to identify or run down an individual user, this will link back in and give us all the events for that user. But these are the type of things that we'll be able to go in and pull out of Cloud App Security for you after this is enabled in your environment, and things you'll be able to go through and take a look at and build attack vectors off of and patterns. And we can see, so it's running a command against this mailbox here. So, for a admin account, not necessarily a big deal. But for an individual user, this might be a red flag. What are they doing? Normal users aren't running PowerShell against their mailbox. What kind of things are happening here? So first thing we're going to do after we've gone through that, we'll start to build out a set of policies for you. And these policies are living, breathing policies. It's not something you want to set and forget. This is something where we're going to come back and you want to update and continue to evolve as you see new threats come into the environment. We want to build these policies out and hook them into other systems potentially. So first thing we're going to take a look at is the risky login policy. That is not at all what I meant to click. Here we go. And so we can see this is a threat detection policy, and we're taking advantage of some of the built-in functionality that Azure provides. So location information. This is all read in from the Microsoft Intelligence feed. We're taking advantage of impossible travel scenario, non-standard locations where it does machine learning on my activities, where I log in from, when I log in, those type of things, and patterns that out. We're taking advantage of known device types or user agents that are an issue, and risky IP addresses, and we're alerting on those. We want to try and keep false positives to a minimum, so we've got built-in checks in the system to look for that. But very, very easy to take advantage of. This is powerful stuff where Microsoft's aggregating up, billions of logins a day to find this information, and we're just reading it in and taking advantage of it to make ourselves more secure. In addition to that, we've got some other policies that we'll take advantage of. One of those would be like the risky action policy here. And you'll be able to see when we look at the risky action policy, we're actually looking at activity types in particular applications. So when I expand this out, I'm looking at all of the online or all of the Office applications at this point. Anything that's happening in Skype, Teams, Power BI, Exchange, what have you, I have the ability to monitor through Cloud App Security. In this particular case, I'm looking for mail-specific functions, editing forwarding rules, creating forwarding rules, changing inbox rules, purging messages, or running commands. That's a typical attack pattern that we've seen so far. Again, this will continue to expand out as we see additional attacks and new patterns and vectors that are coming in. But today, this is a good base to start with. There's a lot of power in this. We're not reading the emails, but we're looking at the actual functions on the back end. What are they doing in the mailbox? And as you can see when we pop this open, there's a ton of other things in here. As we see and learn more and more about these attacks, we'll be able to make more robust policies and implement that in your environment, and then issue the automatic remediation. Once we've gone through and generated an alert based off of those policies, that's where flow starts to come in. So we've got multiple flow rules in place, and the first one's going to be a policy inspector. And what this policy inspector does is essentially look at the rules as they come in. As each alert gets fired off, we immediately inspect that. We send that off to our policy inspector initially. It's going to take a look at the actual content in the alert that was generated, and then it's going to make a decision based off of it. We take a look at what type of event it is. Is it a risky login event? Is it a risky action? Is it a risky email? And then based on that, we call into additional workflows that take the appropriate action for that specific policy. So we'll take a look at one of those real quick. If we look at, say, a risky login event here, again, it receives an HTTP request from our previous workflow. It parses the JSON file that gets sent over, and then it goes and queries our threat matrix. Does it exist in our threat matrix already? If it does, how long ago was it in there, and which particular actions were initiated? If it meets the criteria, we go ahead and we call into our threat assessment workflow. If not, we inject the record so that the next time we see an alert for that particular user, we have something to compare it against. Again, a lot of these activities by themselves are innocuous, and we don't want to go around flipping on multi-factor authentication or disabling accounts for false positives. We want to be absolutely secure before we do that. Finally, we hit our threat assessment. This is the workflow that's actually going to call in and do something. Based on whether it comes in, so the previous workflow, after it parses it out, will make a decision on whether it's a high-risk event or a medium-risk event, and that's going to go through this workflow and make a decision in the switch block which particular action to call if it's a high-risk or a medium-risk. These are the actual remediation tasks. Are we going to disable the account, or are we going to enforce multi-factor authentication on the account? In addition to this, once we call into those webhooks back in Azure Automation, we can extend out the particular runbook that's getting called to take custom action in your environment. And so an example of that would be we can customize the actual activity, which if it was a multi-factor authentication, it's a medium risk event, which group do we want to put it in, which conditional access policy are we going to apply to it. We're implementing an audit mode where initially for the first several weeks we don't want to take any action. We just want to fire off emails so that we can fine-tune the policies and how quickly we're taking advantage of them and initiating that remediation so that you have some level of control over it. I've got some customers that are looking to enable the disablement policy. All right, so for high-risk events, we want to go ahead and disable them and fire off a notification. But for the multi-factor authentication, maybe we've put in some additional logic around that where we enforce it for faculty and staff, but not for students yet. We just alert on them. That's all something that can be tailored to your particular environment, and we can make this function the way that you need it to function so that you get the most out of it. And we'll take a real quick look at the Azure Automation component here. Again, the runbook on this is pretty straightforward, so we create a webhook on the back end, and then we've got some remediation tasks. We can tweak this based on your environment. Because it's in Azure Automation, we have the ability to secure it, taking advantage of Key Vault. So the service account that we take advantage of for this particular component is very secure, and allows us to function without exposing those credentials. And the last thing I want to show you is the Power BI component. So I've got this loaded up in Power BI Desktop. We're going to go ahead and open up Mail Protection here. What we're doing here is we're pulling information out of Office 365. This can be published to the web. You can keep it on your desktop. If you publish it out to the web, you can share it amongst your teams. It makes it very, very easy to do if you guys have used Power BI. This is pulling all your traffic summary from Office 365. These are the categories that are pulled out of Office 365. You can tweak these, rename them to something that makes a little more sense to you, or leave them as is. But it gives you the ability in the report to go and filter down for specific mail types. We can get a nice pie graph here and see, how much good mail that we have, where it came from, the actual message counts on it. In addition to that, and I don't think I have any, I have a fairly small environment compared to you guys, it's going to pull out all the spam information in your environment. Who it's coming from, who it's going to, the actual messages themselves. You can click the link here and it'll take you to the message trace details on that information. If you had any malware that came into your environment. So we're taking advantage of ATP. It's scanning everything that comes in. I didn't have any in this particular case. It'll show the malware, where it came from, who it went to, the details of the malware. It'll even break it down by type. We had some in here last week where we had Word documents that had malware embedded in them. We had links with malware in them. So all of that ATP information is surfaced up in this report. Makes it very, very easy for you to see what's going on in the environment. Where this ties into Phish Hunter and becomes very important for forensic analysis is the SafeLink analysis. So every link that comes through gets scanned by SafeLinks. I have the ability to come in here and filter down all of the links that were clicked on. And what I want to try and find out is if I had a compromise in my environment, and I know these 3 users got compromised, I want to find the link that caused that, and I want to block it so that it never comes in again, and I effectively prevent that particular attack from happening. Doesn't mean somebody won't try something else, but if we know that there's a bad link floating around and they're hitting my users, let's block it and prevent anyone else from having a problem. So I can quickly and easily correlate here. I can add folks to the filter here. It's going to give me every link that they clicked on, and then if there's a correlation between the 2 of them, in this particular case there's not, I can go down this list and it shows me the number of users that clicked on it. I'll be able to find out the singular email that the 3 users clicked on that caused the infection. From there, I can simply go into ATP and block it. Something we're working on adding in right now is changing this from message details to a webhook that actually automatically blocks the email and ATP for you. We'll take a step out, make it easier. Once you correlate it, you click the button and it'll go ahead and block them for you. Very nice feature though, and it makes the forensic analysis much, much quicker. It's easy to find out who clicked on what and to correlate, where the infected address is. In addition to that, we get some additional SafeLink information, number of SafeLinks that came in and were scanned, and any attachments and how they were handled. In this particular case, we didn't have any. If we had attachments inbound or outbound, it'll show how ATP is scanning them and what the blocks look like. So that's it from a Phish Hunter scenario. Any questions so far?